Thasia Anne, local from Erie area most of my life. I've lived out in the country also. Currently attending Edinburgh University. I am a senior this year, and at my age I'm nearly a senior. I'm a great-grandmother with even one great-grandchild and 15 grandchildren, happily married. I have come on my own roller coaster up and down life. Started out here in Erie, married very young. I do not recommend it. I got married right after my 16th birthday, and as a lot of times that shows that it was leading you to a situation of domestic violence, and that's what's happened to me. I was 16 and he was 22. And that's a warning sign. Just putting that out there. I've got a lot of warning signs. I spent 17 years in that relationship, and he moved us way out in the country, and there was no one around to run to or scream for. And after several attempted leavings and being drugged back home, finally at the 17-year point, I just got up the guts and got out on my own. I had been counseling with a gal, and got myself out after I was finally safe, and it took a while for everything to settle down and him to move on and start dating again. Then I was able to breathe a little when he started dating. But I was writing poetry about what had happened to me and the different things that took place in our house. And at first I thought, well, this is pretty bad. I'm like wallowing in what happened, and I'm a positive person, so I don't want to wallow. So I finally called the counselor up, and I asked her, is this really a bad thing that I'm doing, or is this healthy? And she told me it was very healthy, and she sent me to someone to help me get my first book of poetry published, and I did a lot of volunteer work at SafeNet, which was called Hospitality House at the time. They put me through counseling, and then I ended up counseling at the center, and then I led the little brief preview that they would do when somebody joined the education department, and finally I became the education department, and eventually wrote my own domestic violence prevention program, which I taught in the Erie School District for over 8 years. When I became very saturated, I mean, every child from kindergarten to college age knew me, knew my story. Everybody loved me, but I felt at that point that me continuing to tell my story in that way was no longer going to be effective, at least until there were some new generations in there. So I moved on and did some other things, other volunteer work and so on. Eventually, and I'm fast forwarding a lot has happened in my life besides the domestic violence situation. In 1999, my 26-year-old son was killed in a car accident. And he was like my warrior, because we had been through so much of the domestic violence together. And losing him was sort of like, I no longer had validation or vouching for all these things that had happened in our home. Now it was like my word against his, which it had not been until Mark passed away. And Mark had 2 children, and so they have gone on. The oldest is now 21. Hard to believe that I could be the grandmother of a 21-year-old. I let go of poetry for a while and worked. I was working like 70 hours a week at a plastic shop while I was raising my boys. But then after they got out of the house, I met someone else, and I got into another marriage that was 17 steps higher than the abusive one, but it doesn't take a lot to get over that little low bar. When you've almost been killed 3 times, getting over that bar doesn't take a whole lot. So the second marriage wasn't necessarily perfect, and I don't want to go into a lot of details, but it ended also, and then I was single for a long time. I wrote poetry about the bad stuff, I wrote poetry about the good stuff, and always throughout my life I had wanted to go back to school and get a degree so that my domestic violence stuff could really be more powerful. Because as it is, it's just this, victim, or as I like to say, survivor, who was telling her story. But I wanted those credentials. I felt those credentials were very important to me. So in 2011, as a great-grandmother, I went back to school out in Edinburgh and am working on a social work degree. Back to the poetry, there was a place in Erie, the Erie Bookstore. Every Friday night they had a poetry reading called Poetry Scene that was run by Chuck Joy, and I became a regular there. It was first I just sat and listened, and then I got up the nerve to start reading again. And I was sitting there one night when this other woman got up and read a poem about domestic violence, and I thought, wow, that speaks to one of my, or actually two of my poems on domestic violence. It's almost like a conversation back and forth. A couple weeks later, I was sitting there again, and somebody did a poem on losing a child. And since I had lost Mark, I have several poems on that also. And again, it like spoke to each other, like the poems took on a life of their own. And that was the seed, the creation for Women of Word, my poetry project that is now in year 5. We completed it in March out on Edinburgh campus as part of their Edinburgh University's History Month, Women's History Month. We were on March 17th, I believe it was. Anyway, it is different little scenes, and I take a subject. All the poets do their own individual poetry, but I take those poems and weave them into a conversation with each other. So we do a scene on domestic violence. We hit rape, incest, molestation. We cover the gambit of all the situations that are going on worldwide, not just in this country. We do human trafficking and just all kinds of different subjects. And every year it's a little different. Some of the poems come back in different years, but I never do the same exact scene ever. So every year it's different. The first 2 years it was on Barron during their Penn State Barron Gender Conference. And then when I started attending Edinburgh University, I approached them and they let us come out there. It's like my baby, and I'm very, very proud of what we do in Women of Word. We speak for the victims, and that's what I have a lot of professors who attend, and they actually, give credit for their students to come and attend, because it's sort of like getting a chance to walk in the victim's shoes and hear how they felt and their pain without experiencing it yourself. And when you're going to be a social worker, it's nice to have that insight and that feeling and compassion toward things that other people have gone through.
Okay, no, as far as Women of the Word, that was like something like a brand new venue for me to see. And like I said, I talked to you and a few other poets, because there were situations that affected my daughter. There was situations that affected me personally with people that I've lost.
Yep.
And after that experience, I just like came out with like so much comfort.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Knowing that, basically everything is going to be all right.
And you feel an understanding that you've been understood.
Yeah, because for so many years, for so many tragedies, I've always blamed myself. Well, if I could have did this, if I could have did that. I put so much on myself, but I never realized that it was out of my hands.
Yes.
And and a lot of times it's something that you have to go through in order to reach that next plateau.
Yeah. And like I said, we have covered so many different subjects. In many years, we've had a religious segment, and we've covered different perspectives of people who are religious. And then we have a poet who covers the feelings of an atheist, because I feel like I want everybody's feelings to be heard, whether I agree with them or not. And then that way the audience can have an opportunity to, hey, I never thought of it that way, or that just makes me feel stronger about what I felt in the first place. But it just gives them like a sounding board in their own mind. They can do it without having to be brave enough to talk to somebody else about those things they've been worried about.
Yeah, because that's exactly how I felt. Because at the time, I was going through counseling, just trying to get over the hump. And I think the biggest step for me was actually being there, you know, because Luchetta invited me to come there. So I came, and, you know, I'm watching scene after scene after scene. And it's just like, you know, in my mind, I'm just like, wow. And then, you know, I'm hearing Paul on the guitar. Yep. You know, and like, you know, you had the poetry side of it, and you had the musical side of it, and like, you know, the way everything came together, it's like, you know, it's beautiful to me.
Yeah.
You know, like a live action masterpiece in motion.
Thank you. Every year I just give it up to God, and these things come to me, these thoughts, these scene ideas. We never had the music before, but when I attended Snowitree this year, I heard Paul do one of those songs, and I thought, that goes perfect, you know. So that's just the way God does it. He just brings it to me, and I just have to be open and receptive to get it.
Yes, and that, you know, it's a beautiful thing to have venues like that where you can actually come out and you don't have to say a word for it to touch you.
Right.
You know, sometimes, you know, we battle with ourselves trying to find answers. But sometimes the answers come when we're not listening.
Yeah.
And sometimes all it takes for us to sit down, take a deep breath, and to listen to everything that's going on around us.
Absolutely. And to my knowledge, this exact type of thing has not been done before, but I haven't traveled the world or even the U.S. I just know that it came to me, and nothing like it's been done around here, and I just followed what I felt was being given to me as the platform. And every year it's come together, and I mean, so seamlessly. Sometimes you know that there's, you know, a touch, a grace being given to the whole project.
Yeah.
And each year, like, I have a theme each year, and that I don't ever sit around, what's the theme? It just comes to me, okay, this is what we're doing this year. And like what we did in March, what we will stand for, not stand for, we'd never done that before. I just felt that was what we needed to do. And a lot of people in the audience seem to really like putting in their 2 cents worth.
Yeah, as far as that, I was reading up on that y'all had the rally. I believe it was not on my campus.
Yes.
And how was that?
I saw on Facebook. I'm on several Edinboro Facebook pages. And a blurb came up about not on our campus, and boy, if I'd known the subject was coming up, I would have remembered his name, because he was awesome. And if it comes to me while I'm talking, I will blurt it out.
All right.
But he was in charge of it, and I got in touch with him. The premise was there's so many fraternities nationwide that are just known for their terrible antics and their drugs and their parties and their exploitation of women, and he wanted the world to know that that's not what goes on our campus out in Edinboro. So he started this rally, and I contacted him right away, and I said, not only do I do these domestic violence poems, but I have a couple friends that do homelessness and what it was like to be, you know, have a not good parent and those kinds of things. And he welcomed us with open arms. So they did a big march around the campus, and I made the decision for the poets not to march because I was afraid we'd get too winded and then not be able to do our thing with such passion like we do. So we waited for them at the end, and then there were several other speakers. I was deeply, deeply moved when they started coming toward the building we were at, and they were marching and yelling, not on our campus, this crap's not happening on our campus. I got very emotional inside, because so often, like we were talking earlier, all you hear is about the bad kids, and to see this group of good kids marching. And you know, I'm not saying that every kid on Edinboro campus is perfect or has this dream, but there was a lot of them there that day. I couldn't even guess the number, but it was a huge crowd, and we were very blessed that day to be a part of it.
Okay, yeah. And like, you know, like I said, I was reading about it, and it's like a lot of this stuff really doesn't get televised the way it should.
Right.
Because like the more I'm reading, and I'm thinking to myself like, why wasn't this on the news?
We had even our own on our own campus. We have trouble getting support. Like I had gone to. We have a television station, a radio station, and a newspaper and an e-newspaper, and I went to all of them about WOW, and I got a little tiny blurb beforehand. No one came to write about it or experience it for themselves. And they did allow me on the radio station. I got a lot of support from Ron. I was able to do a PSA, and they played that on the radio. But the same with this sorority and fraternity situation. I see these kids on campus all the time, and they're doing fundraisers for some little boy in another country, and food drives out on the corner in the cold. They do a thing out in the cold for the homeless, and they get money and they donate it, to different causes in Erie. I don't know exactly where all of it goes, but I know they're quite often, every week, there's something from one of the fraternities or sororities, and you never hear about that. You hear about, oh, this happened on the campus. There was a shooting which wasn't even on campus, but of course we dragged the campus in it because one of the kids did attend there. But did the campus have anything to do with it? No.
Yeah.
It's the media's job, though. I mean, that's what they do. They try to get everybody's attention, and they don't really care if it's 100% factual sometimes, as long as they get the attention.
Yeah, and I noticed that a lot too. Like I was saying earlier, because at work, there's only one channel being played, and that's CNN. But you don't never hear the positives in life.
Right.
It's always about rape, murder, destruction, invading other countries. Mm-hmm. But so many people do so many good things.
Absolutely.
That deserves that attention and deserves the recognition.
Yep, I agree 100%. It's just the way it is, I guess. News sells better for whatever reason if it's negative. I don't understand that. Even, like they have the Good Kids segment on TV in the Golden Apple. And yeah, that's when people go to fill their coffee cup or something when that's on, Yeah. It just doesn't get this, unless it's your grandson or your nephew, then you sit tight and watch that whole segment. But, I see it in my own life. It's just, but if you hear, there's a tornado or there's a hurricane or an earthquake, then you run to the TV to see what country and who's being harmed and so on. So it's just a human nature thing we all need to work on. And let's look for the positive, and let's be the positive.
Right. Like I tell my daughters, I want to be the example that they want to see.
Absolutely.
So every morning I always ask my daughters, how do you listen? They point to their ears. How do you think? They point to their head. And I tell them, like, they didn't heard this so many times that they already know the answer. I'm like, well, what Daddy about to say next? They be like, smart and intelligent leader, not a follower. And I'm like, yes.
Yep.
And it's like, to me, I want to be able, to pour positive into everybody.
Yep.
Because so many times I say, voice for the voiceless, because so many people get discouraged. Mm-hmm. So you need to see that there's other people out here striving to do something better.
Yes.
Striving to fight the good fight.
Yep.
And, and with the people that I interviewed so far, that's what I see. And I'm seeing it because I just end up in these places.
Yes.
And I see this and I'm like, this is like freaking incredible. So it's like, we can all share our gifts and talents. And basically that's what I want to do.
Yeah. I have ideas for helping with the youth. I feel like so many of the youth, I'm not putting a big blanket, it's not an everybody statement, but so many of the youth, they have both parents working or single parent homes, and they're not getting the kind of nurturing and supervision that you got back when I was a kid. Because back when I was a kid, most moms did not work. They were home, and everybody's mom kept an eye on you no matter whose yard you were in and so on. And you got squealed on a lot. Well, that doesn't seem to happen as much today. So I had some ideas for mentoring programs I'd like to see happen, and I haven't really